Have you ever felt caught between two zodiac signs, struggling to decide which one you identify with more? You may have even been told at some point that you were a cusp, but nobody really told you what that meant, and you can find no in-depth breakdown of these elusive cusps online. In astrology, cusps are transitional points between two zodiac signs. If you were born on the edge of two signs, usually around the 20s of each month, you might feel the influence of both signs, creating a unique blend of characteristics. The 12 core zodiac signs are well known: Aries, Taurus, Gemini, but cusp signs aren't even given names of their own. They're just referred to as Aries, Taurus, cusp, and so on. Many astrologers have dismissed the cusps entirely as not having enough distinct characteristics to justify further explanation. We at Studio Pandemonia believe that they do, and we've created a new system for these 12 cusp signs in our Astral Atlas. We've given them their own constellations, archetypes, compound elements, modes, personality profiles, and dates. As you can see in this modern star chart, the dates that the sun passes through the zodiac signs today no longer aligns with traditional dates of astrology that most are familiar with, which date back to about 400 BC, during the time of the Persian Empire, 2,500 years ago. The stars, in relation to our vantage point in the outer rim of the galaxy, are always changing over thousands of years, as our solar system and all other star systems orbit around the galactic center. Therefore, constellations will change over time, and the ecliptic plane, wherein the sun passes through the zodiac constellations throughout the year, will not always pass through the same constellations at the same time each year. Slowly, the plane, as well as the constellations, will shift. Sidereal astrologers use updated dates, which would see signs like Cancer no longer have dates in July, but in August instead. This would make everyone who has traditionally been identified with Cancer become Leo, and Leos become Virgos, Virgos become Libras. This would, however, confuse most people, undermining astrology's usefulness as a widespread mnemonic system of archetypes and memes. To take astrology literally as some kind of force emanating from the stars and influencing the personalities of people misses the point, in my opinion. Constellations have always been reflections of the world that we live in on Earth, according to the seasons, not the other way around. The constellations are projections of the collective human unconscious, a map of us, not a territory unto itself. We use the traditional dates of the core zodiac in our delineating of the cusps. I actually use the Elemental Encyclopedia of Birthdays by Teresa Chung to decide on the first and last days of each cusp. I studied the spectrum of personality profiles on a day-to-day basis, feeling out the flow and subtle changes from one sign to the next. My method may be a bit arbitrary, but you are free to decide for yourself whether you do or not identify with any sign. Feel free not to identify with a zodiac sign at all. It ought not to be a prescription anyway, but again, a reflection of our humanity. For the first cusp sign in the list, let's look at Ophiuchus, also called Serpentarius, the serpent handler. You may have heard of it, since some astrologers refer to it as the 13th zodiac sign between Scorpio and Sagittarius, from November 21st to November 30th. There are actually 3 constellations here: Ophiuchus himself, with 2 smaller Serpens constellations. Since it's already an accepted zodiac sign to some, we thought it would be the most obvious pick for a cusp constellation. The serpent handler balances heroic Sagittarian motifs with that of the dark scorpionic aspects of a serpent. In Greek myth, Ophiuchus can be identified with Asclepius, the god of medicine and healing. He learned the secrets of life and death from sacred serpents, allowing him to resurrect the dead, which led Zeus to strike him down with a thunderbolt and turn him into a constellation. Ophiuchi have a near shamanic drive to nurture growth, both within themselves and in others. Their deeply thoughtful and calming presence can inspire others to break free from the limitations and embrace their true potential. Far less people know about what even fewer astrologers refer to as the 14th zodiac sign, Cetus, the sea monster, between Pisces and Aries, from March 20th to March 29th. at 12 o'clock on the zodiac wheel. Its tail, or head, depending on the source, almost intersects the ecliptic plane between Pisces and Aries, thus making it ideal for their cusp sign. Cetus balances the oceanic depth of Pisces with the chaotic force of Aries. In Greek myth, Cetus, also called Keto, is the sea monster who Thetis, the sea goddess, sent to take Andromeda at the Phoenician city of Jaffa. Perseus, on the back of Pegasus, turned the monster to stone with the head of Medusa, saving Andromeda. More than just a monster, she may have been a sea goddess in her own right. The Babylonians called her Tiamat, their primordial mother of the sea, who was slain by Marduk on his steed, Mushushu. This myth also inspired the Leviathan of the abyssal ocean that God is said to have slain at the beginning of time in the Bible. Cetus also inspired the name for whales in taxonomy, cetaceans. Cetus signs turn out to be more like whales anyway, present-focused, carefree, and somewhat aloof. They're more like the sea mother than sea monsters, although their monstrous side has its uses for protection and liberation. Personally, I think her monstrous traits have been overblown, and our primordial sea mother, the mother of all life, has been unjustly demonized over time. Let's move on to the other cusp of Aries, Phoenix, the firebird, between Aries and Taurus from April 18th to April 28th. It doesn't straddle the ecliptic plane like Cetus and Ophiuchus do, because this is where we start to take some creative liberties. We chose it based more on its metaphorical strength than for how closely it literally fits between the two constellations in question. Phoenix balances the fiery power of Aries with the earthly cycles of Taurus, regularly returning to the earth to be reborn in its own ashes. The Phoenix constellation is mostly visible in the southern hemisphere, which is why the Greeks don't have their own myth about it. They inherited it from the Egyptian bird god Bennu, who perched on the first island in the abyssal ocean, and from there dictated all of creation. A feminine form of the phoenix, the Feng Huang, is more prominent in China, although it was originally androgynous, representing the endless potentials of life and beauty. The Kurdish pseudo-Christian Yazidi religion refers to this entity as Melektas, the peacock angel, who, like Bennu, created the world in its myriad of colorful forms. Phoenix signs embrace change, variety, and creativity, endeavoring to express themselves however they may, inspiring others to do the same. They tend to go through phases of flight and then grounding, metamorphosing into new people in between. The next cusp sign in our system is Cuniculus, also known as Lepus, the hare, between Taurus and Gemini, from May 18th to May 29th. The Lepus constellation sits at the foot of Orion, the hunter, cleverly eluding capture in plain sight, almost toying with him, like Bugs Bunny. Cuniculus is the ultimate underdog, outrunning and outsmarting his more powerful pursuers. In Ojibwe with Misha Bose, also called Nanabozo, was a trickster god who led a wolf, raven, otter, and muskrat to create the first island in the abyssal ocean. Yes, the motif of primordial waters at the dawn of creation is widespread across the globe. Cuniculus also has a doppelganger in the man on the moon, or the rabbit on the moon. This is one reason that we might say that Cuniculus shares ownership of the moon with Cancer, but that's a different discussion. Cuniculi are sensible, changeable, and sociable, prioritizing the simple life over ulterior motives that only create drama. Like the man on the moon, they dance through the phases of life effortlessly, finding joy in the smallest moments. They're like hobbits, really. Next is Monoceros, the unicorn, which we call Cervus, the stag, between Gemini and Cancer from June 19th to June 29th. The constellation is situated just south of Gemini between Canis Major and Minor. Monoceros was not originally a Greek constellation. It was added later in the 17th century, but the idea of single-horned cryptids were common enough, with some reports of this particular unicorn in India. Some theorists hypothesize that it might have been a rhinoceros. Either way, we wanted to go with a more common animal that nonetheless resonates with the unicorn motifs of pure and elusive wildlife, the stag. We emphasize the horn part of unicorn and renamed the constellation after Cervids, the taxonomic name for deer. But feel free to think of this cusp as the traditional unicorn as well if you like. The stag motif has a rich history in global folklore and mythology, relating to untouched wilderness, horned gods, and the Great Hunt. Deities like Rudra in India, Kurunta in Hittite, and Cernunnos in Celtic mythology are depicted with antlers, associated with stags, and represent the sacred masculine, who has mastery over wild animals as well as himself. He has also become the male god of Wiccan practice, Atho, or Pan. There are also many sacred does in global mythology, goddesses like Diana and the Welsh Ellen, protected and even transformed into does from time to time. Cervus signs are as sociable as Geminis and as heartfelt as Cancers. They intuitively connect to people and to the world around them. They're youthful, expressive, and caring. Next, we have Ursa, the bear, between Cancer and Leo from July 20th to July 31st. It's based on the Ursa Major constellation, just north of Leo. Most Americans know it as the Big Dipper, which is part of it, and I personally think the whole thing looks more like a mammoth or elephant, but anyway. According to Greek myth, a follower of Artemis named Callisto lay with Zeus, who took the form of Artemis. When she had a son, she was exiled by the followers of Artemis, and Artemis turned her into a bear. Later, when her son hunted her, not knowing her to be his mother, Zeus saved her by turning her into the constellation Ursa Major. Bears, particularly mother bears, are the most powerful apex predators in the world, and are fiercely protective of their cubs. Ursa signs are likewise protective, strong-willed, and caring. It's in their nature to support and provide for others. They're a powerful blend of Cancer's compassion and Leo's confidence. Continuing on, we have Corona, the crown, between Leo and Virgo from August 21st to August 31st. There are two corona constellations, Borealis and Australis, north and south. But we're talking about Borealis, the northern crown, north of Virgo, between Hercules, Bootes, and Serpens. In Greek myth, the crown in question was that of Ariadne, princess of Crete, who was abandoned by the ungrateful Theseus after helping him escape the labyrinth with her woven threads. Dionysus found her on the beach, and they fell in love. He then threw her crown into the heavens, where it became the constellation, freeing her from the burden of power, which was a very Dionysian thing to do. Therefore, the meaning of the constellation is twofold. It could represent the symbolic power of a crown, like the centralizing light of the sun meeting the earthly glint of precious gems and statecraft, but its being thrown away could also represent liberation from institutional controls, also resonating with the drive in both Leos and Virgos to be free and real. It's like the motif of Lady Liberty's guiding torch. Corona signs are a blend of Leo's regal charisma and Virgo's practicality. They're quite brilliant, methodical, and opportunistic. The kings and queens among us, you might say, but probably shouldn't. The next cusp sign is Corvus, the crow, between Virgo and Libra, from September 21st to September 30th. It's just south of Virgo, riding on the back of the long Hydra constellation. In Greek myth, Corvus was a raven who served Apollo. One day, Apollo gave a cup to the raven, commanding him to fetch water. The raven stopped at a fig tree on his way down, delaying his return, so he plucked a water snake on his way back, blaming it for his delay. Of course, Apollo saw through this deceit and cast them all into the heavens. Corvus, the raven, Hydra, the water snake, and Crater, the cup, serving as a reminder for all to be honest. Odin had two raven lieutenants, Hugin and Munin, who were his two eyes, the sun and the moon. The eyes of Ra and Horus were the same. The Chinese sun goddess, Shihochi, had 10 blackbird sons, who literally represented 10 suns vying for dominance. Corvids like ravens, crows, blackbirds, and magpies are featured as tricksters and messengers in legends across the globe. They represent vision, cleverness, and tact. Corvus signs, likewise, are intelligent, observant, and charming. They tend to be as detail-oriented as Virgos and as dutiful as Libras. For the most part, they're not as deceitful and selfish as their myth would have one believe. Or at least let's hope. Next up is Lupus, the wolf, between Libra and Scorpio from October 22nd to October 31st. And it's fittingly located between Libra and Scorpius. The Romans named the constellation Lupus, given their founding myth's wolf mother Lupa, who raised Romulus and Remus. The constellation was originally called Mad Dog by the Babylonians, or Uridumu in Sumer, a wolf with a man's head, basically a werewolf. The Greeks associated the constellation with a therion, or a sacrificial beast, which is why they depict it being held by a centaur, and with Lycaon, a legendary king who was turned into a wolf by Zeus after trying to serve his own son to Zeus as a trick. He wondered if Zeus really was omniscient. Although not a wolf, the Amerindian stories of the trickster coyote resonate with this lone wolf motif. Canine deities like the Egyptian Anubis resonate with both the scales of Libra as a judge of the dead and the dark chthonic aspects of Scorpio. Lupus signs are likewise introspective, perceptive, and seductive, aligning with the Halloween vibes of their date range. They embrace their true selves authentically and unapologetically. Here he is. Now that we're back to where Ophiuchus is, between Scorpio and Sagittarius, I'd like to show you my Astral Atlas guide deck for astrology. Everything I'm talking about in this video has been simplified into these minimalistic cards of the 24 zodiac signs, including core and cusp signs. But it also includes the 12 planets, or celestials, from my last video on astrology. We also gave new elements to the cusp signs: metal, dust, wood, and ice. We also gave 3 special modes to the cusp signs: the good, the true, and the beautiful. There are all kinds of little features and tweaks that we put into this little deck and its booklet to simplify astrology for beginners, and to intrigue or perhaps challenge, perhaps piss off intermediate and expert astrologers. So if you're curious, you're a cusp, or you enjoy this video so far, please, of course, leave a like and help us in the algorithm, but also follow our Etsy link in the description to order a copy today. Alright, so I think back to the video then. Also similar to Coyote, we have Vulpecula, the little fox, between Sagittarius and Capricorn from December 20th to December 29th. It's located way north of Capricornus, between Delphinus, Sagitta, Cygnus, and Pegasus. Sometimes, Vulpecula is partially merged with Cygnus, as though the fox is hunting the swan. Other times, the swan is far larger than the fox, fighting it off, one might imagine, like a mad goose. The Vulpecula constellation was added by a Polish astronomer in the 17th century, but the archetype of the clever trickster fox is global. The nine-tailed fox spirits of China and Japan, the Holy Ching and Kitsunes, are fiery shape-shifting tricksters who protect shrines and conduct mischief, both for or against the gods, depending on what they hope to gain. One such Holy Ching, in China, was tasked with the gods to impersonate Princess Daji and orchestrate the fall of the Shang dynasty. She did so through corrupting the emperor and committing horrifying cruelties against commoners. For carrying out these demonic acts and successfully toppling the dynasty, she was rewarded with immortality and access to heaven as a demigod. In Shinto tradition, the Kitsunes are in service of Inari Okami, goddess of the home and hearth. The later Buddhists, being somewhat more chauvinistic, turned her into a male smithing god. The connection between fire gods and foxes seems to be a deeply rooted motif, since even the American coyote, whom I mentioned, symbolically somewhere between a lone wolf and a fox, has a story where, like Prometheus, he steals fire from the gods and gives it to humankind. Vulpecula signs blend the fiery ambition of Sagittarius with the craftiness of Capricorn. Like Vulcan, they are creative, pragmatic, and skillful. Their charitable nature is also of note, quite appropriate to the time of the holidays around the winter solstice, when their births take place. If that interests you, check out this video I made on the gift giver. The next sign on our list is Cygnus, the swan, between Capricorn and Aquarius from January 18th to January 27th. It's just north of Vulpecula, like I mentioned, with great big wings. In Greek myth, Cygnus was a friend of Phaethon, a son of Helios. When Phaethon fell off of Helios's chariot into the Eridanus River, another constellation, Cygnus mourned him and searched for his bones to carry out a proper burial. The gods were so touched by his dedication that he was transformed into a swan and turned into the constellation. Cygnus was also associated with Leda, who lay with Zeus in the form of a swan and birthed 2 eggs, the twins Castor and Pollux in one egg, and the twins Helen and Clytemnestra in the other. And yes, that's Helen of Sparta, who was taken by Paris to Troy in the Iliad. The lyre of Orpheus was also placed next to Cygnus. From Saraswati of India to Benzaiten of Japan, swan goddesses are often depicted with musical instruments, symbolizing the grace and harmony of music. One might also see in Cygnus the graceful sacredness of cranes, herons, and storks, whose life-giving motifs span across many cultures. Even Bennu, who we mentioned as the Egyptian basis for the phoenix, was a gray heron, again representing the creation of the world. The earth diver myth is also widespread, where a water bird or animal brings land up from the bottom of the ocean in order to form the first island. Cygnus signs are similarly graceful, dedicated, and life-affirming. They blend the seriousness of Capricorn with the altruism of Aquarius. They tend to value caretaking roles and feel a deep love for humanity, despite all of our flaws. And at last we have Pegasus, the winged stallion, between Aquarius and Pisces, February 19th to February 29th. It's at the edge of this star map, between Cygnus, Aquarius, and Pisces. Pegasus is obviously a popular steed in Greek myth, helping Perseus to save Andromeda from the Cetus, like we mentioned earlier. But he has counterparts in older Middle Eastern mythologies, like Pisces-Aries of the Hittites, who was also considered to be a storm god. Perseus ultimately gave Pegasus to Zeus, where he became Zeus's steed, representing storm clouds, so this makes sense. Then there's Pazuzu of the Akkadians, a demonic winged panther of Hanpu, the evil sky god, possibly a demonized form of Anu, the Sumerian sky god. Since the Akkadians were originally enslaved by the Sumerians, the Sumerian deities might have had a bad rap. Since Abraham was an Akkadian, Pazuzu is also a demon of Judeo-Christian folklore, which is why his name was dropped in The Exorcist. But he was a demon that Akkadians, Assyrians, and Babylonians prayed to in order to ward off other demons. After all, Pegasus was said to have been born from the blood of Medusa, a monster. He was called Mushushu to the Babylonians, a winged lion that was depicted throughout Babylon, protector of the kings. He was originally the protector of Abzu, the abyssal god of the underworld. But when Marduk, the thunder god, defeated Abzu, Mushushu became his steed and helped him to defeat Abzu's wife, Tiamat. That's right, Cetus. This myth is clearly related to the story of Perseus, probably because the Greeks got elements of it from the Phoenicians, who were a Semitic people like the Babylonians were. But that's another video. The mythic duel between Zeus and Typhon probably relates to this as well, although Typhon in the Greek sources seems to be a conflation of Abzu, Tiamat, and Mushushu all into one super monster. Pegasus signs blend humanitarian dreaminess of Aquarius with the individualistic dreaminess of Pisces. Despite their tendency to detach from reality, they are nonetheless deeply connected with people and social trends. They're intrinsically motivated to aid and counsel others, whilst retaining, usually, a healthy sense of boundaries. So I hope you enjoyed this video. There are really a lot more aspects and a lot of depth that I can go into, such as explaining the elements and the compound elements of the cusp signs or the modes. So if you would like me to do more videos like this, just leave a comment. What are your thoughts? This is a really experimental set. If you like these videos on astrology in general, definitely subscribe and hit the bell icon to be notified of new videos. Thanks for stopping by. I'll see you in the next video.